So I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Grundtner. He's my friend, and I've known him for 20 some years. I appreciate his astrology so much, and his readings are wonderful. So early in Jeffrey's life, he passionately studied astronomy, earth sciences, and the physical sciences. He was and is a lover of earth and sky, spending many days and nights marveling and experiencing both. Jeffrey had a near-death experience at age 11, which made him an empath and a seer and shaped his entire life. And that's what makes his astrology readings really amazing, because he's picking up on things too. He was taught by a Native American medicine man, studied a very grounded form of psychic development, and studied with very gifted spiritual healers. His astrology readings are full of compassion, insight, and wisdom, and are often life-changing. And so welcome. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for being here.
All right. Well, good evening. Um, uh, Thank you for listening in to my astrological ramblings. Here we are, almost a third of the way into the month of 2024. And you may be experiencing it as kind of, sort of moving in a jerky way. That's part of how this particular year will start out astrologically, sort of not really belying the what we're in for. Um, it would be fair to describe this upcoming year as a potentially wild ride, which we should um, be preparing ourselves for by having more internal referencing and deep grounding with our Mother Earth, because the potential that is showing up with the movement is going to be rather electrifying, um, and fast moving at times, and may feel like some of the things that are coming on so fast as to be overwhelming. So I definitely want to emphasize just from the get-go, before I even start describing some of the things that myself and other astrologers are seeing, is that it's more important than ever to stay grounded, to connect with nature, to give yourself from the overwhelm of information, particularly social media, etc. I'm not saying check out from the world, but rather deepen one's own connection with the earth itself, because it's the planet that is our ultimate reference point as to how we embody things, and to be able to contain it. And our spiritual practices that help us to do that, to stay grounded in the body, will help us to manage what's going on in the outer world. And because it's going to be important to keep the nervous system really calm to be able to respond. I hope that warning wasn't wasn't to panic everybody, but rather to start planning now, that as much as we can to be connecting with the flow of life as an important backdrop. So, as I said, at least for me, and I just want to take a moment just to say that I've had some physical challenges, having just dealt with COVID for the last couple of weeks, and some other things that have really kind of slowed me down. But I know also from other people where they're experiencing some big challenges in life and so on. And that may not be true for everybody, and I hope that it's not. I see that other people are going through some exciting things as well. But one of the things that we can reference the astrology here is that we're going through some significant changes at this time, and whenever there's a shift from one modality or one phase into another, um, it can be difficult. As we know, when we are trying to make life changes for ourselves, even when they're exciting ones, it can be challenging to us, disorienting to the systems. We don't always know how to make those as smooth as we possibly can. So
Jeffrey,
as we start out, starting out with this year, we have a lot of planets moving through Capricorn to begin with. Start all moving into Capricorn. So one of the things that is going on is that we are in a stage right now where we're kind of getting the sense of that there could be real big changes coming, and we may be in the state of trying to plan for that, but feeling the push and pull back and forth, and that sort of is where some of the personal planets are that are pulling us into that mode of how do we structure things, how do we create things that so that the what we're wanting to call forth, the new aspects of life we're excited about, have a grounding and a way to go forward. But as these energies are beginning to really shift, big energies are shifting. There's a little bit of static we have here with my technology, and so there's kind of that pulled back, but in very short order, it's all going to be moving very rapidly forward. So just sort of trust from your own personal development point of view that whatever plans and things that you are making will have some value. Even if they aren't going to manifest exactly that way. And I'm going to give a kind of an obtuse reference here because it is part of what's going on, has to do with a review of a process that we've been in for the last 15 years. So let me speak to that for a little bit, because that's going to be one of the big we actually, our new moon is going to be pretty potent here in just a couple of days. But one of the big astrological events for this January that a lot of astrologers are talking about is on the 20th, we have the Sun-Pluto conjunction just moments before both the Sun and Pluto move into Aquarius. And this is hugely significant because it's giving us a double or an extra dose of what the Pluto in Aquarius energy will be like. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, because that is a 20-year process. For this next, 2 decades, we're going to be in a cycle of Pluto in Aquarius. And the reason that I was mentioning here earlier, that for the last 15 years, we've had Pluto in Capricorn. So overall, one of the patterns of when Pluto moves through a sign is that it is bringing new empowerment to what the sign represents. And it does that through a process of showing up shadow pieces and energies that are old, worn out, and are no longer serving collective empowerment. And it tends to break those down. And that is not always comfortable. So in the sign of Capricorn, what we've seen for the last 15 years is a lot of breakdown of institutions of all kinds. not just on a government level, but or it actually, there were a couple different things that were going on, because there were those who were experiencing that tide of shift and trying to consolidate power, trying to grab onto it more. So we have seen that in corporations, we've seen that in politics, we've seen that around the world in governments, of grabbing on to the old system, the old paradigm of, top down, often one, dictatorial entity or group of people trying to hold and control power. And so Pluto transiting through that, we were witnessing a lot of those shifts and change. And then it was punctuated by a lot of big events in that as well. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction 2020 being huge, along with a beginning point for yet another pattern that is signaling that we are moving into the Aquarian age. So I wanted to say that because another thing that would be useful for us, if in terms of our own personal development, is that over this next 2 months, there's going to be some triggering of what patterns might have been revealed for us over these last 15 years. This will be especially true if you are any of the cardinal signs, in particular Capricorn, if you have anything significant there. I'm making an assumption that here know a little bit of astrology, which may not be fair. Typically, I prefer to speak about them in broad, more behavioral, spiritual, and sociological terms. But if I'm moving more into astrologies than is comfortable for folks, but so let's just say that this applies to some more than others, but it's a good time, I would say, over these next couple of months to review the patterns that you have been accessing, the parts of your own shadow with respect to how you're structured your own life, how you react and respond to the structures and institutions in society at large, and to take stock of those things and prepare to compost what is not part of supporting your movement into the future. And that broader movement into the future, which is being signaled by Pluto into Aquarius, has a lot more to do with the empowerment of equal relationships, the empowerment of groups that are associating in a common interest, the empowerment, we will hope, of democracy, so that the Aquarian impulse is fierce about equality and social justice. And so Pluto moving through that is going to awaken a lot of that energy, the desire of the common people to take power that institutions are misusing and recycle that to the kind of power that is more empowering of equality across all. The stratification has actually in many ways gotten worse in recent times, because I said there's what we would like to see happen. There are some things that we would have liked to have seen collapse and break down, and they were able to actually consolidate power. And we can hope that that's temporary. it would be more permanent if we choose not to follow the impulses that we have to really amp up the notion of empowering all people across the sense of us being equal as beings, not necessarily in our expression of personality, because we all do all different kinds of things, but equal as beings, and therefore, um, those God-given rights, to kind of quote our Declaration of Independence. These are that is, in some respects, the promise of the next 20 years. And along with it, as I said, there's likely to be also a lot of shadow stuff. And one of those, because Aquarian is very future oriented and has a lot to do with the use of technology and the spread of knowledge, etc., we can expect extraordinary innovation in those areas. And we know this is already happening. It's just the astrology isn't lining up with it, as one would expect. If you study astrology long enough, you know that it's not coming. And we know that there is potential here for great good, and tremendously destructive things as well. So that's what we're going to be beginning to get the taste of throughout this year. One of the things that is also a part of the overarching pattern for the year is that there will be some momentary incursion back into Capricorn, where Pluto moves back into Capricorn for a 3-month period from September 2nd, basically, our Labor Day here in the US, till November, I want to say the 20th. I'd have to actually kind of double check that, but after the election, at any rate, we're going to take one more visit, and it's to this last degree of Capricorn. So that signifies to us astrologers is that there's a lot of pressure, particularly on what is residual in the shadow and the attempts by the power structures that exist to hang on to power, to consolidate that power. So that this, I mentioned the election. I realize that I'm not really following my pattern here. I apologize for that. I was going to give you a more kind of, here's how it's going through the year. But I kind of forewarned you that I had a little bit of disruption here and earlier, but I hope this is helpful. But I mentioned the election. It's really going to be wild. We see that from the astrological point of view. If you're paying attention to the politics at all, we can have a sense of that already, in that there's pieces that I'm being drawn to that I haven't investigated enough, so I'm not keen on making a lot of predictions. Other than that, it's going to be really a challenging time. And that notion that those last 3 months, with some certain punctuations there in September and October, and then particularly right before the election, are speaking to a lot of volatility, a lot of attempts at deception. There's some indications that these technological breakthroughs, which ultimately might be wonderful, might also be used in very negative ways. Those are going to be the challenges to uh, you know, all of us being able to find a way to discern truth. But I think we need to be prepared. Again, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that this is a local group, although Hope has told me that sometimes we get people from around the country. I don't know if it's international at all, but tending to focus the United States election is a pretty big deal, really, for the world, but especially for us in our sense of what we're going to be dealing with. And so, the right before um, the election itself, it could be very volatile, very volatile. And again, I think we just need to be prepared for that. So now, kind of bringing us back a little bit closer to this time, the things that I was saying was that this this January, things begin to speed up towards the end of January, and then energy will be moving pretty rapidly for the next several months. And so those are good times in our personal life to move things forward. And that's in general. And I want to come back and just reference once again that I talked about the notion that we're going to begin to get the sense of what's it going to be like with Pluto moving through Aquarius, and will we be able to achieve more democratic, equal societies, hopefully on the whole planet. And they're going to have to probably be fought for. There may be, over these next 2 decades, revolutionary type of shifts and changes. So we may begin to be feeling that at the same time. On the personal level, I want to there are the opportunities for us to review where have we come to some understanding of shadow within ourselves, to the sense of authority, to the sense of how things are structured. As we move into February, we will have the inner planets, Venus, we actually started with Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. And Venus and Mars are coming together in the sky, and they will be with Pluto, essentially. So as they come along, that those more personal manifestations of energy, and they encounter Pluto in Aquarius, we're going to get the sense of actually what happens is that they're moving through the Capricorn, which is moving through that part of it first, which is our review. And then they move into Aquarius, and they conjunct in Aquarius. So Pluto is a great time to not only be able to move forward, but to reflect on what have we learned over the last 15 years. Hopefully that made sense. I might have, hopefully I didn't jumble that for you. Can I see some nodding heads? Whether that was, I see most of you have your screens off. Okay, good. Good. In other words, take the lessons of where your own processes for the last 15 years into the sense of, now, how do I move forward in standing up for myself as an individual, but at the same time honoring all others in their own individual sovereignty? This is one of the impulses that Aquarius brings to us. And well, we might tend to view things like structures and institutions and governments and so on. We often have a dim view of them because of the sense that, for millennia, really, but they they often fall into the old paradigm of control. In order to create structure and order in life, they tend to move towards control, whereas our impulse spiritually and as human beings is to be able to achieve our full individual expression. And we have to have the balance of both. We have to be able to have an ordered society that sets up the rules that allow for us to have our full and individual sovereignty and expression. And that is the challenge of the Aquarian age, about how can we do that? And how do we empower individuals while maintaining, the kind of order that is necessary to live life, to be able to everybody go down the same side of the road in the same direction at 117 feet per second without smashing into each other, There always has to be some rules of the road. And that's where the innovation can come in, and where it gets really exciting, as the things that are breaking down that have been used in the past, and if we can find ways to do that in a way where we're not investing our emotion into past things, but rather welcoming, being grateful for the lessons that it has given us, and knowing we don't have to live them again, then we have huge opportunity to move forward. When we throw things in the compost pile, it's no longer worrying about whether it was a banana peel or a avocado seed. It's trying to become something new out of the energy that is released from the fertility. And that metaphor is important for us, because we as human beings tend to hold on to the I don't want to just say the emotional hurts, but that's the one that trips us up the most, is that when we're holding on to the emotional hurts, and that's where we're investing the wonderful and amazing energy of the flow of emotion. I'm not saying anything that any of you here probably don't know. What I'm trying to do is to apply that personal principle. We know when we get stuck in an old emotion, we're not moving forward, we're not enjoying the moment. And so we have to come to some resolution to that. And the more we do that as individuals, the more energy we are freeing up to move into our more creative space of being in the now and creating a better future. And we have to be able to bring that also to the collective level. And of course, those of us in these consciousness movements have always, for as long as it's been, for me, at least 30 some, almost 40 years, I suppose, maybe my whole life, I don't know. But for those of us who have been exploring these ideas, we know this, we know how important, we know how true it is. And we also know at what a struggle it can be at a personal level. If, as perhaps most of us, or many of us at any rate, have had some challenge in our early life, or in fact traumas, how that programming embedded into the magnificent, amazing subconscious that we have developed as part of our survival mechanism, that it also tends to hold us back. We know from that healing principle that when we release that, we have the potential for not only the lessons that it has given us, but the energy for creating something new. And Doing that individually is great. What I see the potential for the Aquarian age is we have to find a way to up level that even more, that it goes beyond just our individual work. We've always said, just do your work and that contributes to the whole. Absolutely, it does. I thoroughly believe that. But I also want us to, so one of my own part of the work that I try to do for folks is how can we bring that to another level? And that's a kind of innovation that pushes our consciousness in a way that if we keep trying to figure it out, and there's that, whatever that saying is, if you're trying to solve, I don't know how, I can't remember how it goes. I'm sorry, I can't drag it up at the moment, but the notion of you're trying to solve problems in the same old way, you're not going to get there. You need different thinking to solve a problem. And so the potential here is, where can we find key pieces that unlocks what is holding our consciousness back? Isn't that a great question? I think. What are the key pieces that are holding our consciousness back? Again, we tend to do that on an individual basis. I think that's a great practice to do just these next couple of months, as I was mentioning. You have a sense of reviewing what's it been like the last 15 years, and your whatever it is, and you challenging that we're challenging you that way and being fully empowered within the systems. But what are those key pieces? And that's an area that I'm exploring, and I want to check the time because I know I've been blabbing here a lot. And
You're okay. You're fine.
Okay. The entertaining the idea of what could we shift that would support a collective shift? What would be key pieces? It's kind of like the notion, I don't know if any of you have run across the notion of keystone species, these discoveries within the ecological sciences, that there are keynote species that have to be there for ecosystems to run really well. And when you remove that species, there's all kinds of disruption, there's loss of diversity, there's loss of the vigor in that. And if we could find what is the key thing that is holding consciousness back, and is there a way for us to shift it? And I think that, I don't know that this is that this is a key, but it's certainly a piece to it, which is when we're holding on to old patterns, when we're giving too much energy to what was, rather than focusing on what we can do together as a key thing. So as we move then into March, we're going to be there's a couple of things going on. There's going to be mid-month, it's a Mars-Uranus aspect, and that could signal some of this more volatile and eruptive kinds of energies. And it may even be within, there is some potential, I'm not necessarily predicting it, but some of the volatility and potential explosiveness that will come along at various points could manifest in the Earth itself. And again, we can see and observe that we are moving into a higher activity with the sun. There's those kinds of disruptions that for which there's potential. We continue to record the hottest year on Earth year after year. as we were moving forward, were really loading up the atmosphere and the oceans with energy. And what is harder to point to is, well, what is actually happening in the tectonics and in magma movements below the Earth. But some of these planetary movements could signal releases of energy there. I want to make a clear distinction here too, that even though we tend to go into a language where, well, the planets are doing this and therefore that, which is more a part of our the way our language is constructed, that or our understanding, really more of our thinking, is cause and effect. Another one of those key things we need to be able to try to transcend, by the way, is if we can get past cause and effect. Again, various people who are working on science and spirituality have talked about that, and we don't really know how to do that yet. It's really hard to think beyond cause and effect. But the thing to understand with the planets is that our aspects of human, what we call these archetypal energies, they just happen to be unfolding in the same. I'm struggling with the language. It came to me the other day. I had a great way of saying it. At least I thought at the moment. And maybe it was just as bogus as ever. But it's like we can see the planets and we see how the solar system is unfolding, and then we'll notice, well, we're unfolding right along with it. And the whole point is where is the development of that particular archetype of human experience? But if you can just entertain that notion, take that into meditation sometime about, holy whatever, the movement of the planet isn't causing us to do this. It just happens to be doing this, and it's signaling that we are too. In our human evolution, we're moving this. It's a particularly human endeavor, perhaps. A government as an example, or creating relationships with others, understanding our own mind, those kinds of things. But it just so happens that these planets that are out there just doing their thing, we're unfolding with them. This corner of the universe, the solar system, we are one with it. And how, based on where our consciousness is now, that's a challenging thing to grasp, even though it's been spoken about a lot. So I wanted to make that caveat, because even though I'm speaking in the old paradigm way, that, the planets are doing this and this is what's happening, it's more fun to entertain the idea that we are unfolding with the solar system itself, our corner of the universe. And isn't that a beautiful and amazing thing? And it's what we feed into those archetypes. That's where we are participating and embracing the evolution itself. So the planets aren't doing it to us. We're doing it to ourselves. And based upon what we are feeding into the archetypal energy is what we're going to get back. Right? So if we're feeding into that energy that, Pluto is about power and control, and there's going to be the people who are, wanting power and control for blah, 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 whatever they're trying to do. If that's what we get, what we feed into it, that's what we will get back. And so it's super essential to, as a starting place at least, to think about Pluto in Aquarius, is that how do we empower people equally in a society that celebrates individuality, but at the same time holding together a structure of order and respect for sovereignty. Um, so anyway, um, beginning in March, we'll begin to experience some of the potential of the volatility that may come up through the year. Then we get to April, and April is a supercharged month. Um, and actually, even at the end, I'm going to spend focus a little bit of time here with the United States because, well, for a variety of reasons. But backing up into March, there is an eclipse, a lunar eclipse. I haven't paid a lot of attention to because my focus has really been on the April 8th total solar eclipse, which I'm going to talk about more in a minute. But the preceding eclipse, just prior to that, the lunar eclipse, and lunar eclipses tend to reveal to us um, subconscious shadow content that we're not really fully aware of. And uh, so they tend to have, kind of more emotional potency to them. And that can be for good or could be challenging, whatever. It just, there's an important thing to understand here too is, because I'm going to be talking about the eclipses, is that we have eclipses every year, and they just they move over, a 19-year cycle as to which signs that they're in. But some have much greater significance than others. But just as a event itself, what's going on in the sky, or it's going on in the solar system, as I was just talking about, is that a kind of where there's a very focused alignment. And so what it means for the human experience of that is a focused alignment of those particular archetypal energies that are represented by that. So you get a real concentrated burst of energy at that time. And I think that, as somebody who is a ceremonialist, I work very closely with the earth energies. That's a bit of what I'm going to describe here with the April 8th eclipse. But these, it's the earth itself that is experiencing these alignments, and we get to observe it. And in many respects, if you're somebody who appreciates ceremony, or just even the notion of, well, I'm going to set some intentions at a new moon or at a full moon or whatever, setting intentions at these times because there's focused, concentrated energy. And we have the opportunity to make a choice within that. Because it can be like a whole range of things. If you're bringing to, I'm going to see if I can do this, kind of making that the Vesica Pisces of two, sorry, I don't have a diagram, but you think of the diagram that in the Vesica Pisces and where the two spheres of energy are coming together and blending. And when you do that with a multiple lineup, that means there's all that potential that's available. And so what are we choosing out of those potentials to call forth? And if we can create alignments within ourselves, within our own energetic field, so therefore we're going beyond a thought, but rather creating an energetic alignment within our spiritual and biological fields, then we're really aligning with what we're calling forth. And I think, again, most of us would agree we're always also, and beyond what we can imagine, so that we're open to the universe gifting us something beautiful and wonderful and unexpected as well. but if at least we know the direction we're going, very powerful, very potent. And so I wanted to emphasize that. And then I'm going to come back to, I started to mention that there's going to be that lunar eclipse, and it is just prior to the April 8th eclipse. And it's near the midheaven of the United States chart. So there is a potential, there's going to be potentials for all kinds of things. Actually, I apologize for doing this to you, but I'm going to back up a little bit, because in February, as these things are shifting and moving, the dance with Pluto in Aquarius, the movement out of the Capricornian energies, and the dance with Pluto in Aquarius, and then Venus and Mars coming together, there could be shifting alliances. Now that can happen on a personal level, like what are your, what groups are you associating with, and to support whatever your goals and ambitions might be in life. So that's something to keep in mind, that, some friendships or some connections, some of that may shift and change. And that could very well happen on the international scale as well. It could happen within parties and groups within our own country. Let's look for, and some of it may be because it's Pluto, maybe unseen, beneath the surface. And for out of the notion or the desire of, trying to have people empowered for whatever their ideas and ideals are. We can't make the assumption that everybody is going to be pursuing that the same ideal as I've expressed it. I am an Aquarian, so when I said that there's this fierce desire for us, everybody being equal, in how we treat each other. So, I'm speaking from my core that way. Not everybody be that. We know that. Part of the desire to have control has to do with people wanting to feel safe in their space, not having their identities challenged. And so it's important that we focus, if you agree with me, I hope you do, but I believe everybody has the right to be exactly who they are, and not, pushed into some kind of mold or control. And it's important that we don't bypass the opportunities to begin to form those alliances and connections that support the ideals that we want to bring forth. It's not that this is going to be the only time we have opportunities, but it is going to be a fairly significant time in the arc of 2024, which is a very consequential year, as we're going to shift more and more going in years forward. So I wanted to back up that way, because that's one of the things that's going to make the whole political thing very unpredictable. We don't know how things will shift and change. And again, even on the world stage, because as we're seeing these wars and atrocities going on and so on, we're already beginning to see protests for how this is all being conducted. And so we can expect that there will be some volatility here. There could be some shifting sands and whatnot in the coming months. So I would look towards the end of March as one of those times when there could be some surprises some revelations. There are going to be lots of opportunities for revelations of truth, and lots of opportunities for amped up deception and messing with people's minds, and especially their emotions throughout this year. So again, emphasizing connecting to higher truth, being willing to actually be humble enough to know that we don't know all the truth, and be open to the possibility of truth being revealed to us. And the more we encourage that, even if we might happen to have more truth than the next person who watches somebody who, I like that it is a better idea to have the that humility before divine truth, in order to encourage, in order to give more energy within our own, all these archetypal energies I'm talking about. We humans are the ones who put the energy in there. The more we encourage the openness to truth within ourselves, that we don't know all the truth, that we are encouraging that within the broader field. That's another lesson in all of this. So now I back. I keep cycling around here. April 8th is a total solar eclipse. I'm sure by now you've all heard lots about it. It's going to be a big event. It is. It was dubbed the Great American Eclipse. So I wanted to do just a quick little recap, even though we've only gotten through these few months. I did give a little bit of an overview as well. But one of the big pieces is that this is a year where we're going to have a more substantial movement of Pluto into Aquarius, which signals a major shift and a change, and a 20-year period where who we are as individuals within a society, a democratic society, a free society, will be tested, and hopefully reinforced and strengthened. But there's also is going to signal profound, deep technological changes, and that's kind of more what's happening on the mundane. And what I would add is that from a spiritual point of view, it emphasizes even more that we come back to the internal and spiritual technology within ourselves. Pluto, there's other signals for this, and I won't try to explain it all. I just want to say as a recap that it's important for us to stay grounded, and to stay connected to nature, and to understand the I don't make these huge distinctions between spiritual and physical. I think our bodies are endowed with some amazing abilities and capacities, and that's all part of being spiritual, is how we're able to operate within that. And so that's a big theme for the year, along with there's going to be a couple of dips back into the Capricornian energy, and in particular because it's the nature of it, it will really emphasize in the fall, is really emphasizing the shadow side of Capricorn, of institutions, of government, of use of power and control, and that is going to be exacerbated by certain other, well, I'm saying exacerbated,
I think we need to try to view things as positives and be prepared for them. And maybe not even use negative and positive, but to view them as opportunities. So the opportunity is to really see um, shadow and to really uh, empower more people to move beyond what was not really working anymore in those old forms. So that's a big theme. The other big theme is that there's a acceleration of technology, of information, um, innovations. Um, there are going to be different times of there will be bursts of energy that could uh, they'll they will definitely show up within our our human endeavors, um, and could start signaling some real game changers. Um, but there's also some planetary indications which will suggest the high potentials for misuse of those things as well. Um, so the idea that as as technologically we understand more about how the human mind and human emotions work, the more people tend to manipulate them, and they're not always for positive and good things. We've seen that in a big way, and that once again emphasizes the need for our own spiritual alignments and um, humility, but in light of the um, the divine, uh, the, the great mystery that is beyond any of our own understandings. So that what we are bringing into how we are informing the archetypal energies from which human beings form our ideas of ourselves, our sense and feelings of ourselves, what we do in all of these realms and how we handle it and how we bring our own alignments to it, are what we are seeing. Our pipeline, they shift and change. It's important that we don't just expect or think that, well, this is what's happening and it's all just going to happen. It will. And if you're doing so without participation, without some kind of consciousness, even if it's just taking care of your own energetic field, um, that's vitally important, or the shifts we want to see won't necessarily come to pass. That's a really important. Didn't yeah, and actually, I'm going to reserve that. I was about to move into a segue from that into the whole notion of our own electrical field and other things that connect in with our spiritual architecture. But I'm going to come back to the notion. I was just about to talk about the Great American Eclipse, the total solar eclipse that is crossing the North American continent on April 8th. Excuse me. And this, again, you may have already heard a lot of things about it, so I don't know how much, like just a little bit of factual information to provide, but in terms of it entering over land, it enters near Mazatlan, Mexico. It crosses into the United States at Eagle Pass. Center line is at Eagle Pass. It will there will be the path of totality for this particular eclipse is quite wide, 115 miles wide. So for those of us who are local here, I mean, I imagine it like it's like from, I'm parallel with Forest Lake, so it's like Forest Lake to Duluth, as the width of the path of totality. And there will be and so it passes over Texas, a little corner of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, New York, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and through New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. So it covers a broad territory. Over 50 million people will be able to witness, plus the people who will travel to that area. So it passes over several major cities in the United States. And here's where we get into the energy of not just this is a powerful scientific phenomenon and an astrological phenomenon because of what it implies in terms of the potential for a reset. In Omega Alpha, that can take place. As I was mentioning a little bit earlier in the talk, the eclipses are these very precise alignments of these celestial bodies. And from a mythic point of view, it's we can see it as that the ceremony is happening right there. That is the ceremony. The moon lining up and blocking the sun. And then that path of that blocked solar actually or combined solar lunar energy, along with some other energies. So that's where it can start to get complicated. And I do plan to do more videos where I'm going to go into more depth of some of the understandings behind what's going on here. But it's that level of intensity and those kinds of energies that are coming together, and what we consciously choose within that. And here, this is like the second, or I've said this multiple times already, but it's important not to get too caught up in what are the exact, how specific you are. Not that that's a bad thing. It's good to be specific, especially maybe about your own progress and movement, but rather to really be clear about choosing a direction or a sphere of energy that you want to emphasize, because otherwise there's all these other different possibilities that will take place. But so this solar eclipse, it was called the Great American Eclipse. It's crossing the American continent, visible to tens of millions of people. And when, on a personal note, when I first took note of it, was actually back in 2017, where we had, that was also dubbed that total eclipse, solar eclipse, in August of 2017, and that crossed from the Oregon coast to South Carolina. It exited near Sumter, South Carolina, and the path that path and the path of this eclipse will cross in southern Illinois. And I was taking note of that. It's not far from Carbondale, Illinois, is where the exact midpoints will cross. But again, because the path is quite wide, 115 miles wide, the one in 2017 wasn't quite as wide as that, nor as long. So this is, has been dubbed a kind of a once in a lifetime total solar eclipse. But I was taking note of that, and because a lot of what I'm particularly focused on are besides all this energy in the sky is the earth, the energies of the earth. I'm very highly attuned to the energy pathways within the earth. You know, involved that I work with sacred sites, but it kind of goes beyond, because sacred sites tend to be, we focus on what we call power centers, and we focus on particular kinds of energies. But there's a wide variety of energies afloat in the earth, and the earth is just so, so amazing. I mean, I know that in every technical term is just wonderful. Amazing is wonderful. But the energies, working with the energies, and what I was noting about the total solar eclipse of 2017, how quickly a lot of things began to change. There were other astrological patterns that unfolded in those years since, particularly 2020 being a very, very powerful one. But we had a lot of things that were being set up with that in terms of the history and trajectory for the United States. And those various places, even if they seemed quite subtle, they were present to the observer. And so I was noting this one as having potentially even more energy, and that the crossing point was what I was particularly drawn to. And so I was intending, I did ceremony with that total solar eclipse in 2017. It was a very potent, very small group in Columbia, Missouri, but it was particularly potent. So I was planning on doing something with this one, and hopefully near that crossing point. So I've been particularly focused and interested in this, and I want to give just a little bit of more of the astrology, and then I'm going to continue on the notion of this ceremony that I'm working with. But in this particular, the part of the energy pattern here, I said that the whole month of April is very highly potentized. There are several things that are going on, and the eclipse being a big piece of this, if not the big piece. A lot of astrologers are also focusing on what's happening later, which is the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction. And that's going to be this huge release of energy, the expansion of Uranian type of energy, which could be that happens, I believe, on the 20th of April, the eclipse on April 8th. But the eclipse is in an exact alignment with Chiron. Chiron is the energy that we know as the wounded healer energy, the energy that assists us to and compels us to move beyond limitations of the past and into a future self. And I would also suggest also the other direction, which is the bringing, because we tend to focus on Saturn energies. The reason for that, I'll give it just a brief rundown, because again, I'm making some assumptions that people know what this is about. But the planet Chiron is named for the mythical centaur Chiron, half horse, half human, but born of a god and of an earthly energy. Was abandoned by his parents, so he's essentially an orphan, and then taught by masters of the universe, the god Apollo and the goddess Diana. And so with the immortality of the God and the power of the animal form, that was his nature. And one could also, suggest that part of his wounding came immediately because his mother didn't know what to do with him. He was so different. So she changed herself into the linden tree. And, the father was a sky god and he left. So that's how he ended up being abandoned. And this is the myth of the wounded healer. He later, he was the teacher, the mentor to the great heroes. He taught Asclepius, who was, the father of medicine, and blah blah blah. And these, from an archetypal point of view, is the notion of how our own divine nature, as we work to infuse it within these wonderful, magnificent physical bodies of the earth, what the process is of how we do that, of how we bring our light into form. And that part of the process often involves this kind of, we call it a wounding, but it is a thing that that comes along, that is part of what isn't yet aligned with divine manifestation, because it's both that it's working for. And each of us has our own, and we call it a wound because it often is a really, powerful wound, but it compels us to go beyond those limitations in order to bring about more compassion and healing to others, because that's part of the drive, is towards divine love and compassion. That is sort of the direction of Chiron's arrow when used for its highest good, is towards divine love and compassion. So anyhow, so Chiron is in an exact alignment. The sun and moon are at the 19th degree, 24 minutes of Aries, and so is Chiron, 19 degrees, 24 minutes. It couldn't be more exact as an alignment. And as it so happens, that is also the Chiron of the United States. So the United States will be going through a Chiron return. The exact Chiron for the United States is just a few minutes of arc later. It is 20 degrees, 8 minutes. And for those of you who don't know these technical terms, so that's it's a little bit more than a half a degree, the width of the moon away from it. But it's within a couple of weeks that becomes exact. But because it's the solar eclipse and it is precise, that is essentially how the United States is going to, as a nation, that we're going to have the activation of our Chiron return. The fifth one, because it's about a 50-year cycle, so we've had it at other times. And that just seems very, very significant. So while I said that this is about wounding, in an individual's chart, we look towards Chiron, or where the person has really taken on some kind of wound for whatever reason, and then try to help and guide them into how do you take the lessons of that to bring it forward, to compel you, to move you towards the specialized knowledge that allows you to contribute in some meaningful way to the advancement of society, to the advancement of I'd rather have a more universal word than society, but that's the one that came out of my mouth. But to the advancement of our evolution, let's say, our consciousness, our movement towards that divine love and compassion that is the promise of us spiritual beings having the human experience, being one with the earth and the cosmos. So, but then we have to kind of go back to this more mundane, that astrological understanding, and what is the Chiron of the United States? What does it mean to have Chiron in Aries? And part of it is the identification with, as I said, I gave that little brief synopsis of its the mythology of Chiron, that he taught the warriors. He understood strategy. He understood, but he also understood the higher vibration of warrior as protector, as guardian of justice. And in Aries, it has a lot to do with the wound tends to have a lot to do with identity. And the when I'm looking at somebody's natal chart, you know, they have Chiron in Aries. So people turning, you know, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52 in that range. But those very specifically in this area, they're experiencing their Chiron return. And so from 50 years ago, the last time the United States had a Chiron return was 1973 and 74. And so those were pretty intense years. You know, we saw the fall of President Nixon, the Vietnam War. We were kept being told that it was going to be wound down, and yet we still had to push forward. We weren't willing to, you know, because of our identity as the great warrior protector of justice, and yet it was all based on lies, and that we were fighting it for the wrong reasons. I mean, I don't know. I'm expressing some political opinions here right now, but I think there's, you know, history would agree with a lot of what I just said. You know, we were ostensibly trying to you know, hold back communism and the influence of China, Russia, et cetera, but we were also trying to deny some people their own, you know, self-determination. We were trying to tip the scale in a certain way. And but that was also the movement for where the next big push for the women's movement, for example, and the ERA being brought before Congress and just missing it by a slender margin, that, you know, it actually honestly should be an amendment. It should be, that amendment should exist. There were enough ratifications eventually, but they put a sunset on it. And so what I was trying to do, and where, you know, I would encourage input from others, is like, well, what is the nature of the United States Chiron? Where is our wound in terms of our identity, or perhaps in our militantism, or in our being a maverick, or trying to also be leader of the world? I mean, that certainly wasn't true early on. You know, in 1825, we were not leader of the world. We were still trying to fend off. In fact, we did a pretty good job with the greatest power on the planet at the time, but we were trying to hold our own here on a continent that was, you know, still in a lot of flux. There were all the First Nations that were still trying to hold on to territory, and there were the European powers who wanted to carve it up, and we as the United States were having to establish who we were going to be, and as a young nation with all that was going on. Anyway, I don't want to drift too far into that. I'm obviously still into the research of that. All I know is that this is a really, really potent eclipse, an opportunity for a reset, an opportunity to look at our past. It will activate these things. It's not going to all happen all at once. But that's why the emphasis is on what is the intention? What energetic field are we going to hold? And what, so trying to discern, well, what is the wound? I mean, maybe we don't need to know it all 100% about what is the United States wound that also allows us to bring medicine, because that's the promise of Chiron, is that you're also able to bring medicine to advance, as I was saying, to advance us towards that notion of, we have to understand the story of Chiron more, but to advance us towards the notion of compassion towards the other, to divine love and compassion, and to move beyond the selfish aspect of individuality and being one's own unique and individual self, but participating and fully supporting the other in that capacity. So this is very a highly potent time where we're going to be challenged in those ways to examine our own past and our own, perhaps the failings. I mean, I think it's rather interesting that I mentioned the women's movement and how flippin' long it took just to get the right to vote, when actually it started out that in a lot of the colonies, they already had the right to vote. By 1807, all the state constitutions had taken the right away. It's like, WTF did that happen? I mean, or rather, how the F did that happen? Sorry, pisses me off. I told you I'm Aquarian, and I I'm just, that fierce advocate for the equality, and it rather stuns me. But in an examination where we kind of step outside and have a more neutral and accepting notion of like what was our past, because I'm doing something that I was actually kind of recommending, that we need to allow it to pass. We can get angry about things in the past, but if we're giving energy to events of the past, we're locking it up and literally giving energy to the repeat of a pattern. We can't go back and make it okay for the women of the 1820s. Their time has come and gone. We can only do the best we can to make it okay for all people now. And the promise, these incredible principles that the United States was founded on, this declaration that all humans are created equally and endowed by our Creator or by the great mystery with these inalienable rights. And the struggle for us to uphold that and working against old paradigms to do that. And I think those ideals are really being tested at this time. And this election year, regardless and beyond the personalities, is we as human beings, and particularly we citizens of the United States, are wrestling with these huge archetypal energies. So I said that I was preparing to do ceremony with this. And what do we excuse me for a second. When we do ceremony, we are intentionally engaging with the forces beyond ourselves and to finding alignments of how we want to be in co-creation with those forces. So the idea that we have this powerful solar eclipse, and as it crosses over the landscape, it isn't, you know, you kind of have to go beyond what is set and known scientifically and into a realm where, again, I go into this more in another video, but that there's the an energy that is released, and one way this is both real and metaphoric, and because what happens as the shadow passes over it is hopefully we're in full sunshine. Let's just imagine that we're in full sunshine. There might be many places along the way there will be clouds, but if we're imagining that sunshine and all that radiant energy that is bringing energy to the atmosphere and is feeding into the whole geophysical aura at any one given place. You know, there is a shift in the geophysical aura, not just the geomagnetic, but the aura that happens. That's why a sunrise, you know, besides its magnificent beauty, and all the response by the life around us, including ourselves, there's something really significant once those beams of light come into the atmosphere around you. It shifts. It's why it's a powerful set point. Likewise with the sunset. Well, so what's happening with an eclipse, where it's full on in a full day, and that radiance is full on around us. So for a moment, for roughly 4 minutes, in some places up to 4.5 minutes, at some places it's less than 3, but it for those minutes, that whole geophysical aura collapses in on itself. And there's a corresponding relation in the energy lines of the earth, in the energy pathways of the earth. And I'm deliberately saying that without saying ley lines, because leys are a very specific type of energy. And as I said before, there are many different kinds of energies. Some that are more liquidy in their flow, some that are, you know, there's some rough correspondence with elements as we understand them. But the energy lines are, you know, because they too go through this infolding and an unfolding process. It's very subtle. We could probably actually, if we could filter out the noise enough, we could probably measure physically the shift in the geomagnetic field at that moment. But what we do know is that these powerful things happening on this cosmic scale is happening right here locally in a fractal, and how we are engaged in it, how we are aligned in it, and the energy we are holding in it is highly potent. That's what I'm focused on. That's why I wanted to be at this place where, you know, these two eclipses. Now there was a really powerful eclipse last fall, and so people on that crossing point, that was an annular eclipse, pretty spectacular for the western part of the United States. And I think that factors into it too. But my own particular focus happened to be these total eclipses and where they cross. but nevertheless, there is that crossing point as well that's in southern Texas. Uh, um, and that may also have some focus of energy. I think we can probably imagine a lot of it. That being such a significant state, and where we're right now having all of these huge challenges around immigration, as well as what I mean, from my perspective, what the state government is doing down there, et cetera. So there's a lot going on there. In the uh, in the southern Illinois, as now I'm going to go into a little bit of story, and this is going to kind of, I should now I don't have this easy clock to
It is
reference.
8:56. It's 8:56.
Oh shoot,
I know,
we're
time just
we're
flew.
done.
We're not
Shoot.
done. We'll stay. We're fascinated. So we're not going to just cut you off at 9. So
Okay,
please
all
continue.
right, all
And
right,
anyone who needs to
I'll try to
leave
do
is
some.
officially at 9, and we won't be hurt if you leave, but continue.
All right. Well, I'll try to do some concluding statements then. Is that this is a really powerful and potent time. I plan to be. There was an extensive exploration. I was having a hard time finding a location because there's going to be a lot of people who are also very much interested in particularly that southern Illinois part, the southern Texas part, but anywhere all along that pathway. And the long story short is that I was trying to find a location where I could do this ceremony, where I could do this geomantic work. I developed a process, and I shared it with people for over 30 years. We did some really powerful ceremonies at the sacred sites of the Twin Cities back in 93 and 94 with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. They were really incredible, and I brought together a lot of information. Unfortunately, a lot of life happened in that interim, so I haven't written the books yet. I hope to. And you know, it would be at the risk of hubris, I would say that they were very significant, and I know that people who participated, it was life changing. But I'd like to believe that some of the seeds we planted within the earth itself at that time have been growing and coming to fruition into moving us, towards the space that I think if we were to, survey the vast majority of people, there's the inner yearning, even if we find different pathways, the inner yearning towards these common goals, or these common experiences of our humanity that we really are seeking. And and this one is no different. I'm seeing this one as a very powerful opportunity. And I was having a difficulty finding a place, et cetera, et cetera. When I traveled down through there, I discovered a lot of things. This is a pretty amazing land, and there's a real depth. I'm talking Southern Illinois. There's a depth of layering in the Akashic that is speaks to a lot of the aspects of the United States, and with some particular focus, as when I was examining it, as what are the things that we need to learn from and move beyond and past. And one of the things that I just hadn't really registered was that the most northern route, and one of the more well, I don't know, I won't make a judgment on how it was different, but the Trail of Tears passes through southern Illinois, and it is remembered, and there's an imprint there of that. There was also, very near the crossing, was one of the really significant debates between Abraham Lincoln. In fact, the giant white oak tree that they had their debate under is still there. And so and then the deeper I go, as Spirit is leading me along here, the more is being revealed. It's fascinating. It's amazing. Anyway, I started to say I couldn't find a place at first, and then all of a sudden that emerged. There was an opportunity, and I have located a place where they were intending to have a music festival during the eclipse, and they happen to be some wonderful folks. They are very open to the idea, and I was seeing how things were lining up and kind of accept that, along with the things that aren't maybe quite right, what I might quite like to have for this ceremony that I want to conduct and I want to invite people to come to. I'd like to invite people to participate, in the overall intent. But anyway, we have a locale, and once that became apparent, and I was kind of going, well, there was this challenge or that challenge in spirits. So that's where I was led. So here we are. And then the guidance came in loud and clear that now I need to go and do ceremony along the entire eclipse path as a setup. We're not just going to wait until those 4 minutes on April 8th. And what I've learned in my long journey as a classically initiated shaman is that when I get clear messages from Spirit, I bet ought to do and follow through, even when it doesn't seem like a reasonable thing to do. So it seemed absolutely crazy, and kind of is. But I've done the first leg of that with my longtime friend and fellow ceremonialist. She supports this crazy work that I've done. We traveled up and around, up through Canada, and did ceremony in Montreal, which is in the northern limit of this total eclipse. Learned a bunch of things that were astounding to me, and traveled down through New Brunswick and then out onto Prince Edward Island to the North Cape. Learned many more things. The responses from nature are phenomenal. You wouldn't think that just, a couple of people putting together a pipe ceremony and putting some crystals in the ground with intention would mean anything on the surface. But it is about that alignment that I was talking about earlier. And again, I want to go into videos because this is a very precise kind of spiritual work. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But the notion is, well, how can two people carrying these intentions out, how can that matter? And I still wrestle with that sometimes, but I remember some of the things that have been done, and that these little tiny, to borrow the metaphor, the little mustard seed, if you will, can matter. And we're following through. And so these ceremonies have happened we went all the way to Nova Scotia, even though that's not necessarily in the path of the eclipse. This is the furthest east we drove, and then back through Maine, through New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, at various stops and places that I might not have otherwise imagined. We were following the path, but I would kind of get, spirit would guide me, and I'd sort of get fixated on it. Well, why this little town? And then we go there and realize some depth of Akashic energy and why there would need to be some release, either for the remembering or for the dissipation, but all for the intent and purpose of focusing and bringing these energies of the long history of, the United States is 250 years. We just experienced the first Pluto return ever, and now we're going to have this. It's, even though we've had these Chiron returns before, this is happening now, and the Pluto return itself brought us to the crisis point of where is the shadow of we as a nation, as a people. And I believe we have seen that. There are these tremendous ideals that the nation was founded on, and we have struggled to really live up to those ideals. So my feeling was that the eclipse is a focused, concentrated point to be able to bring a lot of energy to a rebirthing, if you will. I don't know if that's the best terminology, but it's not a bad one. Maybe the emergence or graduation out of a state of woundedness into a state of healer, of one with a specialized knowledge. I don't know. There's a great deal of potential here. And I think as we observe everything that is going on around us, and viewing these things as all part of the mix and the movement of what's going on collectively in humanity, and that our participation in the movement towards both the principles that our United States was founded on, but also these larger spiritual principles that virtually all humanity will go along with. And so I see it as potentially even bigger than what North America, Mexico, United States, Canada, but really kind of on the world stage and also on this really large stage. And one sort of metaphor reference to that is the fact that this eclipse doesn't start on the North American continent. It starts way out in the Pacific, near the international date line, in the mystery part of the ocean of not far from Zealandia, from the Cook Islands, etc. And it ends way out in the Atlantic, just shy of the the Isles and the coast, the French coast and the British Isles, etc. And I couldn't help but think at that moment in deep meditation, from Lemuria to Atlantis and back again. And so again, I'm not trying to make this too phantasmagorical or grandiose, but I do see that it is a highly potentized opportunity, a time for us to really do something significant in advancing ourselves in our spiritual human evolution, as well as the principles and ideals of this this country was founded on. And the discoveries, the kinds of elaborations that are coming in with spirit are they've been mind-blowing for me. I have I want to share them. I had intended initially to share them in videos as I went along, and that wasn't possible for several reasons. So I'm still trying to take that and to put it out there and share those things with people and ask to invite people to participate in this. So I know I've gone way over. I don't know how many people have dropped off or not, but that is the lead in to more of what the February 12th uh, talk will be about, is really about these energetics of this eclipse, as I'm able to put the story more completely together. And I am going to be, I have decided that part of the process, the things that I want to share and teach, I will probably be offering to people for donation. I mean, there's certainly some of these techniques I could be creating workshops and charging money for, and I definitely need money to support these efforts. I'm not independently wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. It costs, it costs money. We drove 4,735 miles on leg one, and I still have the second leg to do. I have to go back to Southern Illinois here probably this week. I'll be leaving and completing that, going all the way to the Texas-Mexico border. I'm not going to go into Mexico. It's too far, too much. But at any rate, that will be our next, the February 12th thing. And there's a whole lot more astrology going on. I know I've only covered the first few months, but I've also given you a flavor that this year we will also be inundated with things, and it's important for us to manage our own energy and our own connection to our bodies, to our earth, as we go forward and look for, can access the truth, the filter of divine truth, because we're going to be inundated with a whole lot of stuff that isn't. So, all right. Well,
All right.
thank you all. I wish I could see the faces.
Okay. I wonder, yeah, there isn't a way with the phone, but Jennifer asked, where can we see the videos? And I wondered that too. Is there a link for YouTube or
Yes,
where?
I have a YouTube channel, and it's just my name, Jeffrey Grundtner, and I can give a link so that you can pass it on specifically to people. But if you actually just take my name, be sure it's spelled properly. And there isn't much that's populated on there right now.
Oh, okay.
I'll just let you know that. There
Okay.
are two videos. The beginning of this journey, I was able to do two as we were moving along. And the others, I think it was just the intensity of the spiritual energy, but also just what was going on in nature. It was the intensity it's kind of like we got ready to do the pipe ceremony on Montreal, up on the mountain itself, overlooking the city, and we found a beautiful location. And as soon as the pipe came out, it started to rain. So it was like, okay, we're just supposed to focus on the ceremony. And the dinking around with technology right now might not work as much as I would have liked to have done that. So there's a downside to having to reconstruct it, but there's also a really big upside of just being in that moment and then being in that particular energy. And maybe that's more important than being able to have produced the video at that time. Not to mention that it also allows me to, when you're doing it in the moment, there are things that you forget or leave out, and so it does give me an opportunity for it to be even more complete. It was an amazing journey so far, and I know it's going to be more so, or there will be more to come. Any other questions that I might be able to respond to?
If you have questions, unmute yourself and then ask Jeffrey.
Oh,
Uh,
it's Susan.
Hi,
Oh.
Susan.
Did I interrupt somebody?
Nope.
No,
you're
I'm
good. Oh,
Jeffrey, do you have a minute to please comment on having a birthday on April 8th this year? And I'm an
Oh, my.
astrologer of sorts, and I'm really curious what your opinion is. I even thought of asking a friend to go near Carbondale. He lives in Chicago. Or should I run the other direction?
No, I would run in the direction of how do you want to choose your destiny, and what actions will you take to support that. This is a huge cosmic release of energy in the landscape. Now, for you personally, I might want to look at, well, are there other indications in your astrocartography, for example, that would support you being at that place? But if you're already feeling drawn to do it, then maybe not a bad idea. There's all kinds of events besides what we're doing there with the in conjunction with this music festival. But we'd certainly love to have you join us. I mean, that would be a great opportunity for you to participate with that. However, I would need to see the full chart, but it will, in fact, I know this is kind of unfair. You'd like me to comment on it, but that it is such a complicated thing. I feel like I want to punt, but here's what I would say is that prepare yourself to have a high elevation of what you're bringing your light into this incarnation for, with a clear lens of how has your own, even though this isn't your personal Chiron, but where was your wounding that has given you a specialized knowledge? Where can you shine your light in a way that brings focus to healing, towards movement, towards compassion and love?
Yeah.
So, and how can you embody that? Because we're also talking about the moon. If you are struggling within your own personality with any of these things, then having a kind of focused and ritualized movement of that energy into the subconscious and emotional realm, so that you can live it with equanimity and allow the focus of that energy to clear out what may be residual and holding you back from that full living and shining that light.
Thank you so much. And it's just wonderful. And thank you for punting, as you said. And I'll probably contact you and have a reading and have you look at my whole chart. And then just generally, as you said, that's a wonderful description you gave. I have a good friend whose birthday is also that day, and she's going down to Texas. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Where could we get information on the music festival? Is that still open for people?
Oh, yes, it is. It is, and it's incredibly inexpensive. It is the Willow Springs Campground and Music Venue. It's located near Tams, Illinois, TAMMS. The folks had a tragedy in their family life. They lost a teenage daughter, and without going into the full 9 yards of the story, but they have 42 acres of land in this hill country in southern Illinois, and they decided that they were going to set up a space where these kinds of music festivals can happen. And when I visited them, just to explore the idea, well, this would be a location for me to do my work. uh, they were very open to the idea and already starting to shift. Well, what kinds of bands do we want to have here? Do we want ones that are singing about, for example, getting drunk and getting laid, or we want bands and musicians that are singing about universal love and connection to the earth and so on and so forth? So they were already, I mean, I guess they were already kind of going that direction, but I was a catalyst for them to go even more so.
Oh, great.
Which, and so there's still a few details to work out, but they're only charging $100 for the right to camp there and to participate with the music. And
Wow.
yeah, it's a music festival. It's camping. I mean, I think you can bring. I did see some campers and that kind of thing. But it's Willow Springs campground and music venue, and in Southern Illinois. I've noticed that somebody has boosted other things with similar names, so you have to kind of dig a little bit. So I mean, if you go on to Google, you know what? I should include a link with that too, if Hope is willing to send links
That would be great.
for my YouTube and to that campground, so that you get to the right place.
Let's make a little blurb to invite people.
Great.
As a follow-up to this. Yeah, let's do that.
And I think the notion of these the music festival, I mean, there's a whole mix of behaviors and things that go on there. It's a music festival. It hasn't changed a whole lot in 50 years. It's but it is in some ways it has as well. I think not that Woodstock, they weren't being conscious, but we've advanced so much more in terms of the ability to be conscious of the connection to the earth and to each other and so on and so forth. And one of the things that it does do that really supports the notion of the kind of ceremony I want to conduct is that it tends to create coherent emotion. Music is a wonderful vehicle for creating coherent emotion. We might not all have the same feeling, but when we feel uplifted by a song, and everybody is feeling uplifted by a song, that creates a magnificent field, and there's so much power in our own emotional alignment. And then when we connect that literally to the field of the earth with these intentions, to me, you can tell I get excited about it. It's powerful.
Yeah.
So
That sounds fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a quick question before you?
Yep, please.
When you were talking about the United States chart and the Chiron return and the Chiron being in Aries, I was also thinking about Aries being the first sign of the zodiac, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yes.
And could that be significant in terms of new beginnings and the fact of the American Revolution and so forth?
Absolutely. You're right on that one. And that's sort of some of the nature of it being a maverick. I mean, it was the United States breaking free from the colonial European powers, and the American Revolution. It speaks to several aspects of that. I don't want to go into a great deal of detail because we're so far over, but just the notion of the way that the war aspect was fought. George Washington, for those who know some of your history, he learned how to be a commander in the French and Indian War, and he learned a great deal from the native people in how to do what we tend to call guerrilla warfare, but it all really has to do with using, the aspects of the landscape. And what on paper looks like much smaller force can have huge tactical and strategic advantage. And that was one of the things that's part of what Chiron and Aries it can be. And as I said, breaking out there, being a pioneer, and but also being a leader. Like I said, at that time we were it's complicated. We like to think that the Revolutionary War was just about fighting for principles of liberty, and it was that. But it was also other things, the certainly economic freedom and a variety of things. And that's what's interesting. What was interesting about my journey was that I was being guided to some of these Revolutionary War sites. And I was like, well, why am I here? And then I would discover and find out. And again, I just, I hate to be a tease about it, but it's because I want you to listen. It's not because I want you to listen to the videos, I do, but it's because it would just take so much time to get into it right now. I get into those things. It's fascinating. There's a lot of stuff that, I didn't know. I mean, you didn't learn it in school, or if it did, it focused on different aspects rather than really how revolutionary it was as a human endeavor, not just a battle of the colonists against their the monarchy, the power of Britain. So yes, Revolutionary War, it is big. It definitely is. What was the other thing you said about it, Barry? I just remind me. You said it's
The first
new
sign of the
beginning.
zodiac,
Yes,
new beginnings.
right. And it's where it's a kind of energy from which we form identity. It's Mars related. Mars is pushing our personal energy out into the world. That on a personal level, and we're talking about nations, it can also be about that. Something about identity. We were certainly wrestling with that in the Revolutionary War. It was like, well, are we part of Britain or aren't we? And it was because we weren't feeling like we were, so for some of those revolutionaries, there was like, we're supposed to be British subjects. You're not treating us that way. And, that whole notion again of like, we're going to establish our own identity. You've already, abandoned us. So, or are using us. Anyway, yeah, there was just a lot going on there. So most definitely this could be a time, a new beginning for the United States.
When you were talking about the wound, I couldn't help but
Yes.
think about the Native Americans. And I mean, in this particular in Minnesota, it's a very prevalent issue, and it's become more prevalent in the recent past about how to right that wrong. And you mentioned the Trail of Tears. I'm wondering how much of the United States, the wound that the United States needs to face and release is how we moved in on the Native Americans' land and took that from them and didn't do right by them.
Right. I would really wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I mean, now the fact that I'm adopted into the Native way of being, the Dakota, so you could say I'm quote unquote biased that way, but I think it's pretty evident that a lot of our actions were betraying our agreements and those people, and could by today's standards arguably be genocidal in nature, of dispossessing them of their land, of their culture, of their language. And a lot of this journey also that I've been taking and going back to these places kind of speaks to that, and that as well. And so yes, it's kind of like, well, how do we come to terms with our history? That includes also, as we said, the enslavement of people. And then there are interesting things that I am discovering, because we tend to view those of us who have that more uh, sympathetic, empathetic view towards the Native American. We sometimes elevate them, but they had. I mean, there was some serious warfare that was going on between tribes too. So it really is about elevating consciousness of all people here,
Right.
and coming to terms with a lot of things. But yeah, I mean, that may be our wound, is that as we were trying to form our own identity about how we might have been denying it to others, trying to form our own identity as a nation.
Mhm.
And to some extent, I would say that uh, it wasn't new with the folks who came to settle the United States, um, nor unique to Europeans. It's been something that really the planet has dealt with,
Right.
or human beings have dealt with for thousands of years.
Yeah, the conquerors. I mean, the conquerors and the conquered. Yeah, that was the model for I don't know how many hundreds of years everywhere. But
Yeah, and it gets embedded in so
be
many.
over with that. I'd love to be over with that phase.
Wouldn't you? Wouldn't we? The whole us and them, and us is more important than them. That whole BS. Would we love to be able to compost that and be over with it?
Well, that is the old way that will be destroyed. I'm convinced of that.
Right.
What we come up with next is going to be way better than that, and more in the line with your Aquarian roots and
Right.
the Aquarian age.
Right.
I mean, it has to.
And we have to, and it's about learning new ways in order to push beyond that, because that's the other piece. I went into this more extensively in 2020 when I was talking about the dominator complex as an energy within our subconscious, that it goes beyond what we can see and point to as quite evident, and again, too much to go into right now, but that how it exists and how we draw on it so often. I did hear one countering point that I thought was really, it wasn't a counter, but it was a point that I thought was well worth considering, was that part of we humans in developing the us and them, it we needed to know which group we belonged to in order to cooperate. The downside was that once we knew that and decided that, this is us and that's them, we then took it to this other extent that is now in the way of us understanding our true, sublime oneness, our nature of a oneness. And it kind of is, I mean, when would have been the last time there was an Aquarian age, 26,000 years ago? To what extent were humanity even aware of those on the other side, except through perhaps in the dream time, and so we weren't in such direct conflict that one party's feeling of necessity. In order for me to be secure, I have to establish this territory and not allow you in it because you're challenging my identity. That's part of what's at the root core right now. And ironically, even as part of Aquarian age is about identity, about how do we identify who we are, it has the shadow side that the more we push identity, politics, or association, the more potential for othering. I'm this group, and you're the other group. And so until we get that one tackled at a deep spiritual level, at the subconscious level, we're still going to be wrestling with that, BS, Jennifer, that we would both love to just be beyond.
Well, it's going to be out of necessity if we want to evolve.
Absolutely.
And if we want the Earth to evolve, then we are all going to have to get in bed together, so to speak, and just become a lot more comfortable seeing ourselves as human beings. That's our group. Human beings, humanity, and Earth is our mother, and we're all in this together. All beings,
Yep.
all beings, not just humans, all beings, and the whole
All beings. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a big focus in the ceremony that I'm creating too. Is hey, I want to elaborate more on those things, but I want to reserve that for when that's the specific focus. This was supposed to be about the overview of the astrology, and we only got through part of the year.
Well, I'm sorry to take up so much, but
Oh,
thank you.
no.
This was
I love the discussion, and as long as people are hanging with us, it's cool.
Yeah.
I'm appreciating
Yeah,
it.
we're good.